bit later, but Ken Mackay, I'd like to bring you in at this point. I mean, you head up the Middle Eastern Organised Crime Squad in New South Wales. That's what it's called. How worried are you about gang violence?
I suppose if we just settle for what a gang, the term the gang, it's very much a media presented term. We look at different groups of criminals, and the groups of criminals of some level of Middle Eastern heritage are quite a significant problem in this city, and thus the formation of the Middle Eastern Organised Crime Squad, which is there to tackle crime committed by those persons of Middle Eastern heritage or crimes committed upon people of Middle Eastern heritage.
So are we talking about gangs in the sense of groups of young people, or are we talking about organised crime, or are we talking about both?
The Middle Eastern Organised Crime Squad has quite a wide charter. At the top we do look at organised crime groups, or organised crime gangs, whichever you want to call it, but we also have a great interest in addressing the groups involved in lesser crimes, because there is a distinct link between those people, and if they're not addressed they'll move up the levels of crime. We've seen that time and time again. We need to address it at both levels.
Now your squad doubled in size in May this year, is that right?
It was created in May this year,
okay.
but
it was born out of a squad. Yeah, so it's effectively doubled in size. Why?
Well, government and the police senior executive have identified through intelligence and through other parts of information out there over a number of years now that the level of crime, and you've seen it on the media, large numbers of people killed, shootings and the like. Again, offences committed in the main against other members of the Middle Eastern community. The level of crime warrants the size of the squad.
Malcolm Kerr, you're the Liberal member for Cronulla in Sydney South, where we saw some awful violence late last year from all kinds of people, really, not just people from Middle Eastern extraction. Do you think the police are doing enough?
Well, I think the first thing you have to say is that the criminal law applies to everybody, whatever their background. If people commit criminal offences, then they have to be dealt with according to the criminal law. I've been saying for quite some time, and this is an argument with the government and not with the police, that police numbers weren't adequate in Cronulla, and that's led to a build-up in tension.
Let me just cut to the chase here in terms of the media coverage and the way politicians are playing this. Is the problem Middle Eastern gangs in your view? Is that the way you see it as a politician?
Oh, I see it as a breakdown to some extent. In what we saw there was a breakdown in law and order. You had people that behaved badly on the Sunday, fueled often by drink. They committed assaults. What we saw on the Monday and the Tuesday nights was retaliation raids, where a man was stabbed, where people were bashed. Now, nobody can justify that.
But that doesn't answer my question about the way it's being played politically. I mean, we're hearing a lot more emphasis politically on this idea of Middle Eastern crime squads than we are about chasing people who might have been involved in the other assaults.
No, we didn't, because in fact the number of people that were involved in the assaults on the Sunday, large numbers of those were arrested. So what I'm saying is there were crimes committed by people of different backgrounds. Now, we know, as Superintendent Mackay has just said, that Middle Eastern crime is a problem, and many of the victims of that Middle Eastern crime are people of Middle Eastern heritage.
Fadi, how do you feel about the way the debate's being conducted at the moment?
I mean, look, like I mentioned before, we go back to the Bureau of Crime and Statistics, right? 98 to 2002. They say that in the local areas of Bankstown, right, the crime rate for theft, break-in and enters, assault, where it had declined or been stabilised.
But you're also concerned. I mean, we saw how concerned you are. You've brought Napoeleon out here, so there's definitely an issue.
No, there is an issue across the board with youth, and that's why our tour was called All Eyes on Youth. It wasn't called All Eyes on Middle Eastern Youth. It was called All Eyes on Youth because I have a different number of youth that comes through the youth centre, not only of Middle Eastern background, but also of Asian, Australian, Caucasians, of many different backgrounds, and they have exact the same problems. We've got a general problem with youth in Sydney.
Nader, you were once the leader of a gang in your area known as the Marrickville Legends, I think. Is that right?
I wasn't a leader of no gang. There was no gang. We were just a bunch of young guys lived in the same area. And the media labelled us as a gang. And, you know, as young kids, I was 15, 16 years at the time. And as a young kid, and like the young kids that are living today, they want to live up to a name. The media just pushing and pushing and pushing.
And how did you live up to the name? Did you try to live up to the name?
You know, always, as everyone knows, about being part of a gang. And when you're named a gang, you've got to do things. You're going to be the toughest and the baddest people in your city. So that's what these young guys are doing.
And is that what you did when you were young?
That's what I did. I got labelled something, and I wanted to live up to that label, and we wanted to be the baddest guys around. That's what it's about.
And what did that mean in terms of what you did, being the baddest guys around?
No, there's no holes barred. There's just whatever goes.
Now, a close friend of yours was killed in that double shooting we heard mentioned in that story. Can you explain to me and to the people watching this how it gets to the point where something like that can happen?
I got no clue, to be honest with you. Just something clicks. They lose their brain, they lose their mind, and just things happen that, of course, everyone regrets. And that's what it is, it's a split-second thing. You don't think.
You have a combination of drug use. You have a combination of easy access to guns. And this goes back that instead of the government setting up these task force to deal with a certain group of people, let's start setting up other things where we can educate the kids, where we can tell them about these crimes.
But Nader, just getting back to how those kind of things can happen. I mean, when they happen, is it just I guess what I'm interested in trying to get a sense of is, does it tip over easily into that kind of serious violence, do you think?
Tips over very easily. It's just that right now, like they got their backs up against the wall. Everyone's looking at them, and it's just you snap, you crack, you know, you snap, and you can't control it sometimes. You lose total control.
You lose total control?
You lose total control.
Did you ever feel like that?
You know, I felt a lot of things, but we're right.
Guys, might I just ask you a question? If you look at recent times, over the last 3 or 4 years, you've seen a large number of, say, family groups taking on each other quite violently, a number of murders, shootings. Why does that happen? You know, you have all the brothers, and including Dad, and all the brothers over here, including Dad and Mum, and the wider family, really committing serious acts of violence upon each other. Same race of people, you know. And in a number of instances, same religious background. You know, it's very difficult to understand. And again, the public sees that.
Why is it always Lebanese or Middle Eastern people from our background are always focused on? Like, there are those from Anglo-Australians who also have domestic problems, who also commit crimes.
Ken Mackay, why the emphasis at the moment? Why so many police? Why the emphasis on this particular group in the community in Sydney?
Basically, because the level of crime demands this level of response.
That's absolute nonsense, Ken. That's absolute nonsense. In New York in 1990, there were 2,500 odd murders. This state has embraced the same strategies for dealing with crime that New York has used. In this state, we have 50 murders a year. In New York, they have a population of about 9 million. This state has a population of about 6 million. Crime has dropped for the last 5 years in a row. We don't even come near what's happened in New York. And so why is this state insisting on a New York solution to these problems?
Well, again, I don't know what a